What is happening, guys and gals? Joe Badger here, your money mentor, where we have deep pockets and short arms, and where I help you with my nearly 40 years of experience with investing, business, and entrepreneurship. I put together 5 books that I think are must-reads, especially when it comes to the subjects that I like to talk about on this channel, whether it is personal finance, building wealth, big business, entrepreneurship, investing, all those great topics that center around money. And we're going to go into these in detail. I've read these books over the years, and I think you'll really enjoy these and the different lessons that we can learn. Before we go ahead, make sure you subscribe if you like this kind of thing, because we have a lot more coming and you do not want to miss out. So let's get into these 5 books and see what they're all about. Here I am in my library, where I didn't have to go very far for my favorite books when it comes to finance, wealth building, and business. In fact, the first book that I want to talk about is not necessarily The Millionaire Mind. This is the successor, but its predecessor, The Millionaire Next Door. Now, this is the book that really started it all, because previous to this, there hadn't been any detailed studies of who millionaires are, what they do, and how they got there. As a matter of fact, it was just the opposite. Everyone had a misconception of who they were. So Dr. Stanley's book in 1996 really broke the mold and gave us a great insight to the millionaires of America. In fact, before that, he had a couple other books about marketing to the affluent, but he never really broke down all those details. And one of the greatest things about the book, The Millionaire Next Door, was he, a professor already studying that niche, had misconceptions of his own. There's a great story in the book where he goes, okay, how are we going to get all of these details and from the millionaires? Well, the idea was to get a big group of multi-millionaires together, treat them to some food and drinks, and then pick their brains, right? What better way for research? So they set up this lavish setting in a beautiful hotel. They get some of the greatest food. It's caviar and goose liver and pate and the finest French wines, because that's what they thought millionaires drank and ate. So there's a famous story in the book about this one guy who walks in, and this guy happened to be worth over $10 million. And by the way, a very typical example of a millionaire in America. He walks in, and Dr. Stanley says, "Sir, would you like to have a drink of this classic 1920 Bordeaux French wine and some caviar to go with it?" And the guy looks at him, gives him a funny look, and says, "Son, I drink 2 kinds of beer, Budweiser and free." And that really summed it all up. Here, even he, the researcher, had a great misconception of the real, authentic details of the millionaire next door, the guy next door who you wouldn't even suspect to be rich because he doesn't look rich. He doesn't drive a rich car. He doesn't have an overly lavish home, no matter how much money he has. Instead, he has no debt. He has accumulated wealth. He's a business owner. And it turns out that he represents 99% of the true actual millionaires in America. And the 1%, the misconception, are the basketball players, the high-paid athletes, the actors who have a lot of money, or the Hollywood movies that make it look like everybody has expensive cars, crazy homes, expensive taste for fine food and caviar and champagne. So it's really a great, groundbreaking book that I've read more than once, and I've taken a lot of notes. In fact, that's one of the things I do in my books. I mark them up like they're college textbooks so I can go back and read some of the highlights in the past. The second book is The Millionaire Mind by the same author. This book is actually twice as big as The Millionaire Next Door. Now, have you ever gone to a movie and it was a great movie and they make a sequel and the sequel just sucks? It doesn't live up to the millionaire. It doesn't live up to the first movie because we already know what's coming. Well, it's not the case with The Millionaire Mind. This is one of those sequels, one of those rare sequels that are actually good. So The Millionaire Mind is the second book I want to talk about. It delves even deeper into more details of the day-to-day of someone who really accumulates a lot of wealth. The first book was defined by, or I should say the millionaires were defined by a total net worth of $1 million. And that includes their money, their cars, their home, their bank accounts, and minus any debt that they would have. And that all added up to a net worth of more than $1 million. In The Millionaire Mind, it has to deal with people who have accumulated up to $10 million, and he refers to them as deca millionaires. It backs up his initial research that these people are the neighbors next door who you would never suspect to have a lot of money because they don't buy overly flashy cars or homes, etc. Instead, they invest in family, they invest in their businesses, they invest in their retirement account, and then setting up accounts and lifestyles for the next generations to come. So this really goes into some great detail. As a matter of fact, as you can see how thick this book is, and I want to show you how I mark up some of my books just as an example. Like here's a good idea where I'll go through with highlighters and pens, and these different colors and different pen colors, they represent the different times that I've come back to reread the book or reference it. And I put together a long list, and this is for another video, but from beginning to end of this book, I put together a long list of, I think it was over 100 points and bullet points of details and habits that really profiled the Millionaire Mind. And I think I'm going to use that for another video in the future and really go into those details. Okay, you know I'm serious now because I got my glasses on. When it comes to the subject of entrepreneurship, I don't think anybody does it better than Richard Branson. And in this book, Like a Virgin, Secrets They Won't Teach You at Business School, he has a few books, and I felt that this one by far was the best. He is really a serial entrepreneur. This book was written came out in 2012, and at that point, Branson talks about owning over 400 businesses. And one of the things that really surprised me the most is that he did it in a way that would, I think, surprise a lot of us, is that he did not borrow money. You would think, wow, all of these businesses, and he didn't borrow any money. Well, I'm a fan of Shark Tank, just like a lot of people are. And if you watch that show, you would believe that every business starts by asking other people for money and by giving away a big percentage of what you have in order to get that money. Well, Rich Branson isn't the only one who thinks like that, but he does discuss that a lot and how he started out really small, and he always used the money and the resources that he accumulated to go on to the next business. And there's a couple other things. He really enjoys marketing, what he calls cheeky marketing. And that's a British term, but I guess I would call it clever, funny, fun. And he did things like he would go up in a big hot air balloon to promote something. And he was famous for trying to go around the world in a hot air balloon. I don't think he actually ever made it. Maybe he did. But he called it cheeky marketing. But it was his way of saying, let's make it fun. And let's have fun and do things for a lot of good reasons other than just money itself. And it really comes through in this book. Even though he has other books, I think this is one of his best works. Now that we covered small business and entrepreneurship and finance and personal wealth, we're going to move on to big business. When it comes to big business, I don't think it gets any bigger than Jack Welch and General Electric. This was Jack Welch's first real book, straight from the gut, after he retired from General Electric as CEO and chairman. And this book was written or released once again in 2001. And I want to show you something a little special here. That's Jack's personal signature. So when I met him in person at a talking engagement, it was a little treat to me. But with this book, as with any book that I read, any of these books that I'm recommending, and any book that I've ever read, if I get through the first and second chapter and it's a dud, if it's no good, if it's a bunch of fluff, I don't even finish. Or if I get halfway through a book and I'm like, well, I'm really not learning anything, it really doesn't have any knowledge to part to me, then I'll get rid of it. But this book is a must-read, absolutely. And before Jack Welch took a hold of GE, it was totally different corporate culture. And he brought in things like quality control and Six Sigma and developing a lot of different standards in the corporate business world that had an effect globally. Jack was the leader of GE when they acquired CNBC and NBC and other network television studios. He talks about a really interesting leadership concept where you have to know when to hug and when to push. In other words, he had to manage thousands and thousands of people, and there are times when you have to reward people and celebrate, and there are other times when you have to be tough, give them a little bit of tough love. And he developed a meritocracy that really your employment was based not on your resume, but on how you performed. But before Jack really came up with these concepts, they were unheard of. And he really was a pioneer, and I think is to this day. And now the corporate world really is a different entity today. Tech has definitely overcome that space, and GE still has its presence, but this was a huge, important era in the history of global corporations and in world global business. The next choice is a really fun book, and bear with me now, it really does have a lot of relevance to our discussion, and it really does apply to life and business lessons. This one is The Way of the Wise Guy by Joe Pistone. Now, they made a famous movie with Johnny Depp called Donnie Brasco, and the movie was more Hollywood. This book is more down to earth, and Joe Pistone, as an undercover FBI agent, goes into some of the nitty-gritty stories about bringing down some mob bosses. And it's tough because here we have a culture that really enjoys mafia stories, whether it's The Godfather or The Sopranos. But keep in mind, these are fictional stories. Joe Pistone gets into the details, and it's not pretty. A lot of these people are just cutthroat, as you can guess, right? And it's not glamorous at all. But he really approaches it from an interesting perspective and tells how law enforcement had to go deep just to get these guys because they're brilliant in many ways. They really know their industry, and so the FBI has to go through a lot of trouble. And Joe Pistone, he himself was a tough guy that went undercover. One of the greatest lessons and examples, and I'm going to read a small little excerpt here, is what he talks about in gaining respect. Now, throughout our lives in business, where we work, with our family, with our friends, with strangers, there's always a bit of respect that we need to gain for ourselves. None of it is given to us. And Joe Pistone, once again, he was doing an undercover operation, and he's in Vegas, and they have this big fancy suite, and two New York tough guys come in, and then he's meeting with, and of course they think he's a mobster as well. And they come in, they're walking around, they're real tough. The one guy sits down, puts his feet up on the furniture, and just reacting, not even thinking, okay, this is a FBI operation here. Just as a human being, Joe reacts and he goes, "What are you doing?" The guy goes, "What?" He goes, "You got your feet up on my coffee table." The guy goes, "Yeah, I'm making myself comfortable." He goes, "Would you do that at home? That's really showing me a lot of disrespect." He goes, "I don't like that." And he went on this tirade or a short rant and really shamed the guy. And imagine, this is a big, tough mafioso. And the next thing you know, the guy is apologizing to Pistone, saying, "Hey, listen, I didn't mean any disrespect. Let's still go on and make this deal," and so on. And it's a great story because Joe says this as a result. "In the end, the best way to gain and keep respect is to stand up for yourself." Now that rings true to all of us in all walks of life, in any business. And then he finishes off the chapter after he admonished the mobster for putting his feet up on the coffee table. He says, "I now had his complete respect. I demanded it and I received it." So Joe writes, "In life, you will be accorded precisely the respect that you demand for yourself. Once you learn that lesson, you are way ahead of the game." So you can imagine if that attitude works on these bloodthirsty killers, that we can assume that that attitude of standing up for ourselves and being allotted the respect that we demand for ourselves in any situation with anyone is going to work well. If it can work for these tough guys, why not anybody else? A common thread in all of these books is that I've come back to them time and time again, and I've learned new stuff with each new read. Now, as a bonus, I want to talk about one last book that I left out, and that is a book called Instant Influence by Robert Cialdini. Now, this book I read a lot because it has to do with marketing and the psychology of how people think. Not in a manipulative way, but in a natural way to get what you need to get in an efficient way and how people think. Like, for example, he talks about the principle of reciprocity. You do something for someone, not in a manipulative way, but in a natural humanistic way, their response is to do something back for you. So it's a great kind of bonus book here, and one of those books that I go back to more than once, even though it's a classic and I've initially read it many years ago. So I really hope that you enjoyed these books today. I know that I did, and I wish I could have delved even deeper, but I think now it's in your hands to read them and see if you can actually get any valuable information out of them in terms of finance, business, or personal wealth. If you have any comments and there are any books that you'd like to suggest that I read or that I can review for the future, leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, please subscribe to the channel because we have a lot more coming. You do not want to miss out. And thanks again. Joe Badger out.